This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Robonzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Hey kids, thanks for tuning in. Two things before I tell you about my guest for this episode. First, if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe. You can do that wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Why subscribe? You'll always be privy to the latest episodes as they are released, plus you will be helping other musicians find this podcast. The second thing is, please consider signing up for the Unstarving Musician community. By doing so, you'll receive helpful insights that I have picked up over the many years that I have worked as a gigging musician, plus those I've garnered from the hundreds of conversations I've had with other musicians, including those who've been interviewed on this podcast. And you'll get a free copy of the official ebook version of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, written by yours truly. If you sign up, I hope you enjoy it. To do so, just go to unstarvingmusician.com and you'll find out how to do it right there. My guest, Chris Taylor, is one of my favorite people, and I've not even met him in person yet. His creative energy is a force of nature. He's a singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and visual artist. He's also a former guest of the podcast way back from episode 65. He has a couple of recording projects in the works. One is a solo work, except that he's given creative license to a producer friend, kind of a collaboration, and the revival of a band he formed in the 90s called Love Coma. I wanted to learn about all of this and get a feel for where he's at since last we spoke. We explore the motivations and drivers behind his crazy creativity, dealing with the voices in his head, creating his own rules to spark creativity, and much more. You can check out his music and art at christaylorworld.com. Okay, here is me and Chris Taylor.
Oh man, I love all that kind of stuff. I'm a sucker for transient noises and outside noises. Yeah, as long as it's not annoying. I guess those kind of things are annoying to me.
I assume the Love Coma project, which Glorified Song of Depression is part of, right?
Actually, no. So the solo record that I'm working on with Misty Jones, that's probably going to come out first. It's almost all the mixes are final, and now we're going to send it off to mastering. To where the Love Coma record, we're still working on it.
And this song is from the solo work with Misty Jones?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the name of that album, it's a mouthful, called Lovers, Thieves, Fools, and Pretenders.
Cool. I got that in the Dropbox. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a very different kind of a record for me, and we can talk about that, but it sounds like a band record, because it's just got so many layers and amazing sonics on there.
Okay, we'll talk about that and Love Coma, I hope. Excellent. Glad I clarified that.
Sure.
You make so much music, it's hard to keep up with if I'm not keeping up with you day to day.
No, I know this. It's craziness. But, to strip it all down, my record with Misty is Lovers and Thieves. That's pretty much going to come out probably earlier, or I should say later this year, but then Love Coma will hopefully come out before 2019 is up. So we'll find out. Yeah, we'll find out exactly what's going on. But
cool. Well, since you and I have done this before, let's just keep on going like we already started.
For sure.
And okay, so I think that last time we spoke, I might have that date in front of me. It was back in August of 2018. So not that long ago.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, how did we meet? I don't
know if it was it Abe?
I bet
Partridge,
it was.
Or maybe Tom Meany, or maybe they recommended.
Yeah.
They passed my name to you.
Yeah, one of those guys
was
said.
it Dean? Oh, okay. Dean Johannesson. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
It was, my wife just kindly reminded me that it was Dean Johannesson, that my wife has got a memory that she encompasses all. So yeah, she just reminded me that it was Dean Johannesson that passed my name to you. So how cool. Thank you, Dean.
Swinging Dean. He
That's
said,
right.
I have this quote that I read back then, or that I shared in a blog post, but he said, quote, "One of the most prolific singer-songwriters I know, one of the kindest people I have ever met, and probably the most inspired and inspiring as well." And he said that you met at Dripping Springs Songwriters Festival. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exact, man. How super cool of him to say that.
And he's such a nice guy too. I mean,
He is.
Not that. I mean, I think that makes it more meaningful. Not that he just passes those compliments out all the time, but because he's such a cool guy, that must mean a lot. But you know what? I for what I know of you, I have to agree.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's, well, first of all, we just got a chance to hang out with Dean. He passed through San Antonio. He got a chance to stay at our house, and he gave us a piece of his art. So now, among all the other pieces of art hanging up in our house, we have a Dean Johannesson piece, and we're very happy about that. And yeah, it's really, really cool to have great relationships with so many wonderful people that, are some are on the radar of the mass public and some are not. And it's really great when you can find ways of supporting each other and encouraging each other along the way, because we definitely all need it. And yeah, so Dean is definitely one of those folks that we met, and he was playing this sort of gypsy jazz kind of music, and which was like another world to me, another planet of music. But we had so much in common, and we got along like long lost brothers or something, and it was really, really cool. And now I feel like I'm closer to people like him and Abe and Tom Meany and some of these other folks, even more so than I am musicians in my own town. It's really, it's become a family of sorts, the whole Dripping Springs cast and crew. And that's a very, very cool thing.
Yeah, and such cool people too. I have to put a windscreen on my mic. Hang on a second. There we go. That will hopefully help. The funny thing is the back of the mic is facing the window, so it's catching. It's I guess I don't know my microphones that well, but it's a Shure. I can't even ever remember the model number. It's a very popular Shure vocal mic. So it's got the round. I don't know if it's a condenser mic or what, but it's got the round kind of mesh globe on it, and so it's picking up a little bit from the back, I guess.
Yeah, it might be a SM58 or something like that.
Yeah, it's like SM something beta, but anyway. All right, I digress again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw that Dean, I was going to ask you among my list of questions a little farther down the list was, did you get to hang out with Dean, or did you get to perform with him or something recently? Because I saw some things on your Instagram, which is very fun, by the way. And your Instagram, is it at Chris Taylor World?
Yes.
Amazing. Anyone listening, you got to check it out. But did you guys get to hang out and perform?
I just, we just went to go and watch him play a few times and just sort of cheer him on and be fans of his. He's got such a unique musical style that, more of a outside the box rock and roller such as myself, I would find it kind of hard to fit in without feeling like I'm ruining his vibe,
I think you're so talented, but I can feel the intimidation or the perceived awkwardness that might create because his style is so different, right?
The thing that I realized about Dean that I didn't know as much watching him at Dripping Springs is seeing him and hearing him play. He's like an amazing, among other things, he's also an amazing lead guitar player. And I didn't really realize that, because here he was kind of, he was playing with loops, and he was able to do a rhythm part and a lead part, whereas like at the Dripping Springs, everyone is pared down and there's no effects pedals, no nothing. It's just guitar into speaker. And so yeah, it was really great to even see the more versatile side of him. And I'm sure when he plays with his band, it's even more amazing. It's more colorful. So it was really, really great. But yeah, we were there just cheering him on and having a great time.
This was in San Antonio?
Yeah, he played in San Antonio, and then he made his way up to Austin to play sort of a off the beaten path gig during South by Southwest.
Cool. Does that mean that the we were talking about Dripping Springs, and I'm sitting here jotting down some notes at the same time as we're talking, but did one of them just happen, the Dripping Springs Festival, or is it?
No, that's going to be happening in October.
Okay.
Cool. But Dean was just on a tour, and he was just making his way through Texas.
Are you going to be performing Dripping Springs in October, and is Dean going to as well?
We don't know yet. Every year they have more and more people wanting to play that festival. Yeah. And we always throw our name in the hat, but there's no guarantee we're going to come back. It's like we want to. Yeah. I get the pleasure of living fairly close, so I'll probably be there, whether I'm just a spectator cheering them on or whether I'm playing the festival itself. But yeah, it's such a great group of people, and even more often than not, even the newer folks coming in, are just as awesome. They all sort of become family, cousins and distant cousins. Some of them are closer, like brothers and sisters. So it's a really, really great festival, but I hope to play, but I'll probably be there no matter what.
Cool. Hopefully I can be there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm dreaming of going and like seeing all you guys and watching one of these. Maybe we'll work it out. I don't know if I've told you yet. I probably have said as much on the podcast, but so you probably recalled that last year my wife and I went through Austin on our U.S. vacation / work trip, and I was telling her, we should make that a regular thing, and maybe we could bounce back and forth between Austin and San Antonio. So I hope that this year we will fly through your town, and hopefully when you're there, and no matter what, we'll get to hang out.
Yeah, I would love to be able to meet you in person and spend some time with you. That would be super cool.
Especially if I could see you play.
Yeah. I'm always a fan of either, like, especially if I'm not playing, it gives us more of a chance to hang out and talk. But yeah, that would be really fun.
All right, let's finish talking about your recording projects. I took us a little off track, but I was asking, probably won't make the final cut, but I was asking about a track that we could share with listeners at the end of the episode, which is going to be, maybe I'll remember I said this, so I don't say it again in the intro that I'll record after our conversation, but it's going to be Glorified Song of Depression and we were discussing that it comes from a solo project you're working on with Misty Jones. That's kind of funny, isn't it? Doesn't sound like a solo project all of a sudden, but you can tell me about Misty's role here in a sec. But that project is called Lovers, Thieves, Fools, and Pretenders. And I was confusing that with another project we can talk about in a minute, but tell me about Lovers, Thieves, Fools, and Pretenders, and Misty Jones, and Glorified Song of Depression.
All right. Well, probably about 10 months ago, I finished working on an album that I recorded mostly at my house and brought in a bunch of my favorite local musicians. And it was, I was working on, as always, I was working on a couple different projects at once. And during the daytime, I was working on this real sort of catchy, upbeat album, sort of the don't bore us, get to the chorus kind of music. And then
I've never heard that. That's great.
Then at night I was working on a real, it's sort of the exact opposite of that, real dreamy songs. I was creating sort of this tapestry of music that I was going to write to, and I ended up, my goodness, taking a few months to just really create this sonic piece that was going to be lyrically sort of the story of the last 8 years of my life, or the journey that I've been on, and what I've been through, what I put myself through. Real heavy record. So I had finished that, and I mixed it, even got it mastered. And then I got in touch with my friend Misty Jones, who Misty and I have been friends for a real long time. She used to live here in San Antonio, Texas. And then she's a musician, a singer, this amazing soul. And she could probably tell you the story better than I could, but in my imagination, she got chosen to go to this sort of like this producer school. I don't even know what you'd call it, but this school, I think, is in Spain, and she learned all sorts of techniques and recorded all sorts of musicians at all different levels of their game. And she has come back with the magical powers of production and remix. Just this amazing, amazing woman. And we're talking, and she did a remix of one of my songs, and I was like, this is so good. What would you think about doing a whole record like this? And so I basically sent her all the songs. She fell in love with it. And she said, send me all the stems to your music. So just the bass and the vocals and the drums and everything on separate tracks. So I sent her everything. And then I said, all right, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. So let's not do it, take any fast actions on here. So I said, only work on it when you're inspired. So 10 months later, she is, I think, 2 mixes away from finishing this album and sending it off to mastering. And I told her in the beginning, I said, basically treat this like it's your own project. Don't worry about asking me for permission. Don't wonder what I'm going to think about anything. Like, do whatever you want to these songs. This is your playground. And yeah, just getting back to your point about, it's a solo album, but it's really with Misty. Misty is the official producer of this record. To me, these songs are just as much hers as they are mine now. She's just put her heart and soul into it, and she's turned them into these, wonderfully beautiful, dark in the best way, wicked in the best way, just these amazing songs. So I'm super excited about it, and that will be coming out hopefully in the next, maybe 2 or 3 months. That's kind of what we're shooting for.
Cool. So when are there any, and maybe a lot of them or maybe none of them, are there any new tracks on this? Or because I have a memory of speaking about Misty in our first conversation for the podcast, and this idea that you might have a remix, the whole thing. So did you record any or write any new songs for this, or were these songs that you had written, and forgive me if you told this in the story you just told, but were these songs you'd written many months ago, published, and then the conversation ensues with Misty, and she's going to remix them all into a completely different thing?
Yeah, well, basically, I thought I was going to release this album back when I mixed it and produced it, and I just never did. I held on to my version, and I said, I knew that if I worked with Misty, it was going to be a lot better. Okay. Cool. So I saved that. I saved my own version, and so no one's ever heard those songs. And
not even me.
Not even you. No one in the world. And so I was right. I was right to follow that instinct. It's kind of like dropping your pride and your ego for the best reasons. Like, that one other person is going to bring just all the special stuff to make your songs better. And that's exactly what Misty did. And it's like one of the first records I've ever made where I'm so excited for the world to hear it. not because of me, but because of her and what she's done. To me, it's a total collaboration, to where it's 100% my ideas, 100% her ideas. And, it's like a brilliant way to work. And the thing is too, is that I'm in San Antonio and she's in Nashville, Tennessee. And, so it's like we're separated in distance, but somehow this woman is just on the same page as me, creatively. And she just has a whole set of tools, production wise and otherwise, that I do not have at my disposal. And so for her to bring those tools and say, all right, to where it's like if an artist just had, red, white, and blue, and she brings the yellows and the greens and all these other sets of colors, and it just knows how to use them in the right way. And that's exactly what she did with this record. And I'm so proud of it. Mainly because I really want the world to hire Misty as their producer and say, look what she can do. And you don't even have to be in the same town, which is amazing.
Well, the sneak preview that you have shared with me is really fun. It sounds great, and I can't wait to hear the final cuts. And yeah, I think this is a great way to praise her, and especially when the release comes out. I should, probably pause this part of our conversation for the benefit of other artists that are listening, other music artists and visual artists. We talked about this a little bit in our first conversation, and that is creativity. But I'm reminded of the topic as we're talking, realizing how much work you've done, in the interim of our two conversations. And I also, because I spoke with a couple of indie artists in the past couple of weeks who were challenged with various things, and one of them is going through a transition, and creative, songwriting is suddenly not as it's not happening as much as he wants. And so, I had my thoughts on it, and one was don't rely on inspiration. It's more about discipline. You have to schedule or commit to time for yourself to write songs. If that's what you want to do, you got to commit the time and write 10 bad songs to get the one good one or whatever. And same thing if you're writing a story. Maybe the same thing I'm sure is true when you're painting. You just have to start, right? But what is your take on staying creative and battling the lulls of creativity when they happen? And by that I mean, like, assuming you've experienced them, periods where you feel like you're going through a little creative block.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes, man, that's a really great question, and it's different every time. For me, a few years back, I just sort of decided within myself that I was going to be, that I was going to try and remain in a creative mindset, because I found that if I didn't intentionally want to create something, whether it was a painting or a lyric or a song, or try to record something even, I found myself slipping into melancholy, depression. I was stressed out a lot. And then the opposite of that is true. When I'm creative or creating something or living my life in a way to where I'm purposely choosing not to dwell on whatever circumstance or situation I find myself in, whether it's a lack of finances or whether it's, you look on your phone and you're inundated with the chaos of the world or whatever it is. Being creative is like allows you an escape, sometimes from yourself and other times from the rest of the world and all of the troubles and trials, and everyone's so angry at everyone. And so that was a way for me to kind of escape all of that and to get my mind healthier. And so it wasn't about, trying to get other people's attention, or trying to sell a song, or trying to come up with the greatest song ever written, that in and of itself can be a killer, because you're looking at your friends and other musicians and people that you're really, you're big fans of, and you're like, man, I can't write a song like that, or, oh, I can't, they're succeeding and they're writing all these amazing things, and how come I can't write that? It's like, you can't compare yourself. So if you can sort of teach yourself, you know what, I'm not going to look to my left and right and compare myself with other people. I'm not going to sit around the house stressed and depressed all day. I'm going to use that time that I would normally spend worrying or getting stressed out, and just pick up a paintbrush and just try to make something. And don't try to make the best thing ever. Just make something, or go take a walk outside and just breathe in the air and forget for a moment about everything else. Just enjoy the sun, enjoy the misty, rainy days, enjoy all that kind of stuff. And that's it. It was like a training. It's just training your mind, renewing your mind, and getting focused on being a creator. And, you don't have to write the greatest thing ever. You don't have to create the best thing ever. You just do it. And then over a period of time, you look back and you kind of go, I like this one. Oh, I like this one over here. And you pull those things together and you might have something. But even if you don't have anything, then just that sheer, you look back at all those days you could have been worrying, and then you have pieces of art or pieces of music that you have to show for it, instead of a bunch of worry and fear and stress. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So I remember, again, from our first conversation, we kind of got on this a little bit about creativity and the intentional act of creating helps you kind of, not your words, mine, but, kind of stay out of your own head from time to time. Mm-hmm. But I guess, I was kind of thinking, well, somebody listening to this go, and that sounds all good and well, but why am I not doing that? Why haven't I done it? And just wonder if there's a point in time or an event or a person or a thing that motivated or inspired you or made you realize that this is what you needed to do. Do you recall any such point in time?
My goodness, I don't recall an exact moment. I think it was just, I think for me, it was just years of, I have come out of years and years of beating myself up over things of the past. Mm. And, yes, I mean, there are people who've completely inspired me. I remember watching an interview with, of all people, John Mellencamp, mm-hmm. like in a more recent interview. And he also paints and does a lot of artwork. And I just remember him, saying something like, and if it's out there, I'm going to take it. If it's already been done, if it's laying on the side of the road, I'm going to take it. I'm going to use it in my art, whether he means the more his visual art or in music. I think I probably a little bit of both. And I just thought that was funny, it's because everybody takes from everybody, whether it's consciously or subconsciously anyway. And I just thought, and I'm taking his words out of context, but it's great to find that. I think it was like a 60 Minutes interview or something. And I just laughed and I thought, yeah, that's the rock and roll thing to do, man. And then it goes back to that I don't know who said this, but it's the quote, talent borrows, genius steals. And I'm like, well, I guess that makes John Mellencamp a genius, and according to that quote. But as far as just me getting inspired, it's like you kind of almost have to like create your own rules. Like this is what I do for every album that I make, or every time I write a song, I set a parameter. Like one, at the start of one record, I wasn't very inspired, but I knew I wanted to make a record. And so to get me inspired, I tuned all 4 of my guitars to different tunings. So every guitar was in a different tuning. And then the typical standard tuning that you would use when you pick up a guitar at a guitar shop or something. And so that in and of itself inspired me, because then I had to learn where to put my fingers, how to play it, what chord comes next. And out of that were songs that were born that I never would have written if I had just left all my guitars in standard tuning. So it's something as simple as that, like challenging yourself. Or like I said, I made an album where I was like, okay, there are going to be no moody, dreamy, epic songs on this. Like everything is going to be 3.5 minutes. Don't bore us, get to the chorus. You know, that whole mentality of like every guitar riff has got to be catchy. You set these parameters for yourself, and then it gets you in a whole different mind frame of how you're going to approach your next project or your next, you know, even if it's just one song. All right, what am I going to do in this one song that is different from the last, 10 songs that I've written, or however many songs? And so, and then, when I'm painting, sometimes I'm like, I'm only going to use black and white. I'm only going to use black and white today. Like, what can I create with just black and white paint? How can I make this thing interesting? And you set your own parameters, and then it causes inspiration to strike inside of you. At least it does for me. And that's sort of a way to trick your brain into getting out of its funk. And like another thing too, and I don't want to go on long-winded about this, but another thing is where you're, like, as a musician, where you're playing, the venues you're playing, they certain types of venues could kill your spirit. I've seen this happen to myself way too many times. And it's those venues that are like the restaurant gigs where you're happy to go play this gig, but it's a restaurant and there's a bunch of people that are there that aren't there to see you. They're just there and they're talking over your music or during your set, and you're writing these songs that are like pouring out your soul, and there's this disconnect, and you're trying to win over this audience that's just sort of, and that can be a challenge, but doing that time and time again could kill your spirit. And you have to find gigs that are designed for the kind of music you're writing, or you have to write songs that are designed for your venues, go in and sing wallpaper music for a wallpaper crowd, and so that also can be a problem. You have to stand back and look at, like, okay, why is there a block in my life? Why is there a frustration in me? And, you have to look at where you're playing, who you're playing to. Are you getting enriched from your own gigs, or is it just you're going home with this heavy heart, and you can't figure out, what is wrong, why you're losing your own joy for your own music. So yeah, man, it's an endless, it's like an endless well, but there are ways of inspiring yourself when you can't find anyone at hand to inspire you.
You're listening to my conversation with singer-songwriter Chris Taylor, and what you are about to hear is a snippet from his forthcoming album, Lovers, Thieves, Fools, and Pretenders, a collaboration with producer Misty Jones. This track is called Glorified Song of Depression, and you'll hear it in its entirety at the end of our interview.
Found myself under a rock that didn't stop the clock. Moved for some fresh air. You still found me there. All my life I've been running from my trouble, buried deep under the rubble. Oh, you found me there. Sliding down to my elevation, moving on up to a new location.
Those are great ideas and tactics, if I can use that word. And, and I guess hopefully this is helpful out. You reminded me of an experience I had just yesterday, and I share it thinking that maybe this will drive it home if you didn't already do so for anyone who has experienced or is experiencing or, wants to help someone who's experiencing a kind of a creative block. So I'm not a songwriter per se, but those of you listening. But I had an opportunity yesterday to play one of these blues cruise things with a very good friend and a guy that I was only acquainted with until yesterday, who comes here annually from Switzerland to play around Panama. And so it was three of us, and I played some hand percussion. But yesterday was not a great day for me personally to do anything, arguably. Yeah. And I could have been a real downer day. I wished, honestly, it was such a challenging couple of days that I was even wishing in my head that there was a way I could get out of the gig, which is awful, right? But I of course,
I've been there. Trust me, I know that feeling.
Yeah. So anyway, of course, I went ahead and did it. Which, by the way, be careful with that. There are certain circumstances under which you do need to step back, and I have made that mistake of not stepping back when I needed to and not doing the gig when I needed to not do it. But I went and did the gig, and I got home. I was gone all day, and it was very fun for a lot of different reasons. The music was a blast. I got to make this new friend, and there were other people on this large catamaran that some of whom I knew, and I met some people, and then we're coming back in the evening, if you can kind of picture it. We're coming back in the evening, the sun is set, and they've got the kind of, I call them disco lights, but they got the lights on, and people are dancing, having a great time, myself included, because we were done playing at this point. But I walked in the door, and my wife was asking me how I was feeling, and I said, the funniest thing, once I started playing, nothing bothered me at all. And during that time that I was playing, and on that boat, actually, everything was gone, I guess, because I was so focused on what was happening. And I believe there's such an endorphin accompaniment whenever you're creating. So I think that's I just shared it because I think it's another good reason to give what you just described a shot, because there's such an endorphin lift, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, there are times when I'm physically, I don't feel well. I don't really know what it is about what's happening in me. I'm some kind of sick, and I can't figure out what it is. And I'll go play the gig, and within like 3 or 4 songs, I feel like I'm on top of the world. And then on the drive home, I feel that heaviness again. It's kind of like, whoa! But while I'm playing, it's like you get this idea that you're Superman or something. And I think it's because those endorphins are released, and you have music, I think, has this literal power to heal, or become some sort of a balm that soothes your inner soul, your inner self, even for a time. And then, there's got to be some sort of a rush of endorphins happening especially when you step up to the mic, or when you're behind an instrument and you're out there playing and you're in front of people and you're on for a period of time. Yeah.
And I guess it's elementary or basic, but it's also amazing and very fascinating, isn't it? So
definitely.
Okay. I really wanted to ask you today, and I don't know how much there is to talk about on this topic, but it is something that is a good question for you anyway. We'll see where it goes. But Patreon. So you've been utilizing that model and that platform, Patreon, for your music ecosystem, your economic engine, as I've heard it called by a very smart guy. Yeah. I heard this great conversation with I got to find this. It was on the Tim Ferriss podcast, but he talks about he does his whole work, his whole life is research, and then he writes these great books. But the context was that they were looking at the difference between really great leaders and the rest of them. But one of the things he's written about is this intersection of, I can remember two of the three things, but, finding what you're really good at. And one of the other important ones that we, a lot of us forget about is the economic engine, which is, essentially the part that supports your art, however it happens. And when that converges with whatever that third part is, I'm forgetting, then you can really achieve great things. So yeah, Patreon part of your, I'll put that in the show notes if anybody's like, what is he talking about? I'll find it. But yeah, it looks like you're doing some neat stuff, and I'm kind of curious if you can remember from like August of last year to now. Are you doing anything new, and how's that going? Are you thinking about different things to do for that part of your music and art ecosystem?
Well, much like a lot of my musical and artistic life I've had, I kind of make it up as I go along. Like, I wish I was that really savvy, smart business guy that said, well, if I do X, Y, and Z, I can take my fan base here. But I really, I don't think about those kind of things. What I've done is I've decided Patreon is sort of the new way I'm going to deliver music month to month to my fans. Now, trying to get your fan base to go, oh, okay, this new thing, new to me, Patreon, let's jump on board over here. That's been a struggle to get people to kind of, click on over and say, all right, this is for me. But what I'm deciding to do, I feel like I'm about to turn 50 this year. And so 50 seems like a great year to sort of out with the old, on with the new. And so at 50, I think I'm going to clean house a bit. And I'm so proud of, like, there's been musical highlights through my life, and I'm super proud of some of the older music I've done. And I'm really, really proud of both this record that I'm working on with Misty, the Lovers Thieves record, and then my band album, Love Coma. So what I really want to do is take just the best of the best from my past and these two new releases coming out later this year, and like, that's it. So if you like any of my older music, get it now while it lasts, because when I turn 50, I think it's all going to disappear, with the exception of a few pieces that I really, really like. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that yet, but I think that's because I have about 30 or so albums that I've made, and that's a lot to consume for anybody, especially for an artist that most people aren't that familiar with. And so what I want to do is to maybe make a good like 5 to 7 albums like that you must have from me, and don't worry about all this other nonsense that you're missing out on, So that's the idea. So I'm going to give people a few months to download everything that they want from my back catalog, and then from here on out, it's just going to be a few different items, and then plus whatever I create in the future. And that will be done through Patreon. Just yesterday, I released the first of those. It's called the Nashville Sessions. And from 1997 to 1999, I did 3 different projects in Nashville. And I took my personal favorites from those 3 and put that into one 12-song album called the Nashville Sessions. And people can get that right now on my Patreon. And that's even if you sign up at the $5 level. I mean, I just made it to where like anybody who wants to give can get this. And yeah, but it's really just me making it up as I'm going along. and going for it and hoping that I give people much more than what they're paying for.
That's really cool. This is, the way you prefaced your answer makes me realize that this is just another way that you are creative. You said you're making it up as you go along, but you're sort of thinking of these, what can I do that's different, at least in my own world, and that's what you're doing here. That's very cool. I like that.
Yeah, the thing about being the CEO and the janitor of your fledgling little artistic career is that you got to do everything. And if I had if I had a team of people around me to help me, I would be making different decisions, probably better decisions if I had the right people around me. But for right now, it is just me. And I got to figure out how to streamline my life to where, okay, at 50 years old, there are certain things I don't want to do anymore. Like there are certain venues I don't want to play anymore. There are certain things I don't want to say yes to. There's a lot more I want to say no to. But at the same time, I got to make a living. So I got to figure out all right, what do I want to be doing? Because from 50 to 60, that's 10 years. And I'm like, all right, what do I want to be doing at 60 years old in my life? And there's that 90% of me just wants to let my hair grow long and wild and grow a long beard and move on to a farm and just paint and disappear into painting. And then, maybe 20 years later, somebody can find my skeleton all painted up in the middle of some sort of a strange farm museum with nothing but Chris Taylor art everywhere. I think that's sort of like where my imagination says, yeah, you want to do that. You don't want to be playing these little restaurant venues trying to get people to become your fans, it's just a crazy, my brain is so, and I think maybe it's because I have epilepsy, because I've had epilepsy ever since I was 2 years old. So maybe it's between the medication I've been taking for my epilepsy and the fact that my neurons are firing at rapid amounts, that all of this stuff is just sort of colliding in my head. And I just, instead of just thinking about it and not doing it, I just freaking do everything. And so I become exhausted and very passionate about my life and my projects at the exact same time, which exhausts most people, I think.
Oh yeah. It's interesting. Interesting things learned about you both from the mindset and the part of your life with epilepsy that you mentioned and whatnot, because I see, I watch people like yourself, and maybe, occasionally somebody looks at me and thinks, I guess it's all perspective, right? Your vantage point. Some people may look at me or you, if you're listening, and think I might be of Chris, and others, like yourself, Chris, that are just creating madmen and women nonstop. Yeah. How do they do it? But, I think it's just something that you have to do.
Well, it's because there's the idea of creating for consumption. In other words, a lot of musicians are like, oh, I want to get fans and I want to be noticed and I want people to love my songs and I want to create because I want to be noticed. And then there's the guys and the girls, men, the women that want to create because they can't not create. It's not about, oh my gosh, I hope people notice me today, or I hope this becomes somebody's favorite song, or I hope somebody buys this piece of artwork. It's like, I have to do this because I can wake up in the morning and spend 8 hours on Netflix, or I can wake up in the morning and go hit the canvas and see what I can make today, or I can tune my guitars differently and see if I can write a song I've never written before, or whatever it is. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just how you're wired up on the inside. And even if no one hears 90% of what I've made, I have to be okay with that. I have to figure out a way in my mind to go, you know what? It's all right. even though I'm so proud of all of this stuff, and I really wish people would slow down their life and press play and give it more than, 30 seconds into the song before they're on to other stuff. I wish that's okay. It's all right. Because really the most important thing is that you get to look back on your life and say, I've been creative. I used my time all right, man. I just made stuff my whole life. Yeah. Whether it becomes famous or whether you become popular or whether you get noticed, that really shouldn't be high on the priority list. And that's a tough thing to reconcile, because we want to create things for people to see, but sometimes we just have to realize this may be just more for me than for everybody else. And we won't know that until our life is said and done. But that's kind of the way I have to, it's all about renewing your mind and telling yourself these kind of things, so you don't feel, that weird feeling of being ignored, or feeling like you're invisible because other artists are getting attention and you're not. That all can play tricks on your brain, and you have to kind of go, nope, I'm wired up to do this, so I'm going to do it.
I think you should give talks, maybe inside your Patreon world, or maybe else on some other platform, on a broader one for creatives, because you have a lot of you have a lot of personal stories and strategies that you've used and that are working for you. And I think that a lot of what you're sharing can give just about anyone pause or inspiration in their own creative journey. But we're getting close to the end of our time, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Love Coma, and I guess to try and not just benefit me and hear about how you unearthed an old project, but why you did, and maybe this is going to feed into the stream of creative talk that we have going here. But so if I remember right, Love Coma is a project, a band from the 90s that you had going on, and then somewhat recently you decided to unearth it and put the band back together and record something with them. So I know that's in the works, and if you want to talk for a sec about like when people will be able to hear that, that's great. I guess maybe though you could also talk about why did you do that, and what in the grand scheme of things in Chris Taylor world, and maybe in somebody else's who has something similar that they could dust off. How do you think it contributes to the big picture for yourself?
Sure. Well, I'll give you the real short version. So I'm full steam ahead working with Misty on my solo record. So I had no reason to just go, hey, I think I'll just get Love Coma back together after 24 years. So Love Coma was my band. We started back in 1992, and I thought it was going to be like brothers till the end, the same four guys. I wanted to be like the U2 thing, where it's the same four guys until the end of time. And I realized pretty quickly this was not going to be that way. So it ended up sort of becoming a revolving door of musicians, with the exception of myself and drummer Chris Dodds. We always had a different sort of guitar player and bass player. But all these years later, after I broke up the band in 97, because, some bands just can't make it, and we were traveling all over the place and not making enough money to really make it worthwhile. And I thought, well, before we get on each other's nerves and end up hating each other, let's call it quits. We all went our separate ways as friends. And I get a phone call 24 years later from our guitar player who played on our second record and did all the tours with us. His name was Chris Mattingly. And he's like, Taylor, I've got songs. And I'm like, first of all, I haven't even heard from him in like years. It had been years and years. And I'm like, what in the world? And he's the guy that's not on social media. I envision him just living in the woods somewhere. He's that kind of person where when he wants to be off the radar, he's way off the radar. But he says, Taylor, I've got songs. They need lyrics. They need arrangements. So this and he sent me the songs, and I heard them, and that was why I wanted to start this band again, because of what Chris Mattingly brought. He brought the real big guitar riff, rock and roll. He had that going, and then he also had these dreamy, beautiful songs, and you're like, oh my gosh. And which was so refreshing, because I didn't have to start from ground zero. With the Misty record, I felt like, I just did all of this writing, and I felt like I've just written some of my best stuff. So I felt like with Love Coma now, I could just be the lyric guy. I didn't have to come up with all the songs. And so it was really, really great. And then, of course, Chris Dodds, the drummer, wanted back in, and our original bass player has become like a missionary pastor in Mexico. So we knew he wasn't going to be a part of the band. He wasn't going to stop saving souls to become a rock and roll musician again.
Did you call him? Maybe you never know.
We did talk, but I knew it was more. We've always remained friends, but it was more for other reasons. And I just knew, I'm like, well, Love Coma is always my band, and I thought, I want this to be a real band. I want to go play shows. I want to do this thing for real. And Jeff is not going to, drop everything in Mexico and cross the border back into the United States to play bass guitar for us. So we ended up getting a call from our dear friend JJ Placencio, who is the original bass player for a band called Sixpence None the Richer.
Oh, yeah.
So the serendipitous thing is, our original lead guitar player, Matt Slocum, left Love Coma because he started this little band called Sixpence None the Richer, and they skyrocketed into as much fame as a young band could have at that point. And there was no way Matt could balance playing in Sixpence and Love Coma. So 24 years later, the original bass player for Sixpence wants to join Love Coma. So how wonderfully cool is that? And JJ is so amazing. He plays bass, fretless bass, upright, and cello, and he sings. He's got a great voice. So he just makes us stronger and better as a band. And he's actually producing our new album called The Boomerang. So it's this beautiful story of, I didn't think I would ever be a part of this band again. And now everyone has come back. Everyone's so good at their instrument. And we're making, I think, the best record we've ever made in our lives. So it's a really, really cool thing.
That's cool. All serendipitous, as you said, or fortuitous and somewhat random. That it's happening. So it wasn't part of the plan. It was just it sounds like it was just another creative opportunity, and it felt really good. And you guys like each other.
Yeah, the song will tell you everything, man. And like, out of those first handful of tunes that Chris Mattingly sent me, I think 2 of those made the record. I brought in a few songs. But the great thing about Love Coma is it's a real band. Like, everyone is bringing ideas to the table, and everyone has a say in where this thing's going to go. And even though it's my band and I'm sort of the captain of the ship, I love to sit back and let other people bring their best ideas to the plate, because it just makes everything so rewarding. It's like working with Misty and saying, like, I love what I created, but I know having her on board would make it even stronger. And it's connecting with the right people, and people that you trust are not going to trample over what you've just brought to them, but enhance it. And I think that finding that is a very tough thing, but when you do find it, hold on to it, nurture those relationships, encourage each other. So like with Love Coma, I'm just saying, like, let's split it all equal. Like, if there is any money to be made in this thing, let's just everyone gets an equal share of everything. Like, no one worry about who brought more to the plate. None of that makes any difference. Let's all be a part of this thing together. And it takes like all the pressure off, because more than likely there's not going to be any money to be made by it. But on that off chance that something does happen, we're ready, and there's no ego involved. So that is a beautiful thing in and of itself.
Yeah, that's so cool. I can't wait to hear it. And I'm going to, I guess, leave listeners with something that you suggested to me, and I think we all need to do. It's kind of akin to taking time to smell the roses. Is that the expression?
Yeah.
That when you sent me the previews for Lovers, Thieves, Fools, and Pretenders, you encouraged me to get out the headphones and just sit back and give it a listen. And you prefaced that with saying, I know it's a lot of stuff, but when you have time, as time permits. And obviously I think of you because I'm listening to your music, but now the headphones bring this Chris Taylor world connotation to my mind, because it is a way to just sit back and chill and take a break. So everyone, put on your headphones today and listen to something really great. If you can find some Chris Taylor music, maybe the stuff we've talked about if you're listening to this in the future, which you surely will be because you won't be hearing it today, but maybe some of the things that we've talked about, and certainly the song that is going to play at the end of our conversation. Man, there's a lot of other stuff we could be talking about, so maybe there will be a round 3 someday soon. Thank you so much for joining me for round 2, and I hope that when my wife Sammy and I are in the San Antonio and Austin areas, that our schedules and time will collide so that we can hang out.
That would be so fun, and I really appreciate being asked back. I love your podcast. I love what you're doing for so many musicians. You're highlighting them and bringing them to the minds and forefronts of people who may never have heard of us before, and it's super cool of you to do that. And it means a lot to me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir. The feeling is mutual. I will talk to you very soon.
Sounds good. Peace.
Found myself under a rock. That didn't stop the clock. Moved up north for some fresh air. You still found me there. All my life I've been running from a trouble, buried deep under the rubble. Oh, you found me there. Sliding down to my elevation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Built my house on a sad foundation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Worry without, worry within. Am I running from or running to sin? You found me there. Raising hell, making a mess. Can't shake the turbulence. You found me there. Sliding down to my elevation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Build my house on a sad foundation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. I'm rolling down the hill in a busted barrel, crashing to the tree of peril. You found me there. Every night I drive into a ditch. I wake up every morning like a son of a bitch. You found me there. Sliding down to my elevation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Build my house on a sound foundation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Sliding down to my elevation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Build my house on a sound foundation, moving on up to a new location. You found me there. Moving on up, moving on up, moving on up.
Hey, thanks for listening. Question for you. Are you struggling to move your music journey forward? I can help. If not personally, then by referring you to the next best available resources. Schedule a free 15-minute call with me to find out if I can indeed help you. It's easy. Just visit unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to schedule your call today. Look for links to just about everything covered in this episode in the show notes at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. This episode was powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. It's available on paperback, Kindle, and ebooks just about everywhere you can find them. It's also available as a standalone podcast called the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. I'd love it if you picked up a copy and would love it even more if you left a review. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.